All right, good afternoon. Welcome back here to Trader Minute. Great to have you aboard. Bear with me for just a couple seconds. I want to get the thumbs up that we're streaming here. Looks like we're good to go. All right. All right. Interesting day. And I know you said, well, Jeff, the market hasn't moved at all. How can you say interesting day? But very interesting day in the market. And it's one where there's no challenge signal. You can probably tell by the title of this video. And I'll show why, and I'll show all the crossovers on what's going on. But we have a market that is seeing a little bit of erosion in the market internals, right? We have a market where the bullish optimism is growing to a level that is a typical level for some reversal, for some downside action, right? And so those couple things, you kind of go, okay, do we start to see some sell-off come in? Do we start to see, maybe the market fade some of the recent, month here? And then we see news reports come out, right? And we've had two today, but we had two yesterday, we had one overnight. But we keep getting these reports that the U.S. and China, in regards to trade, are moving, moving far apart from each other. Where some reports are saying that China is backing out of initial agreed upon things, where other reports are coming out saying the U.S. is doing that. It's a hodgepodge out there. In fact, this last report was from the Financial Times, where it sent the market, down kind of instantly. And it's just one where, okay, we keep getting these reports, but we're not seeing big drops. Yeah, they're fast and they're about 10 points, but let's face it, that's not a drop. That's nothing serious compared to what, normal markets are. And then they're getting bought back up very quickly. We saw it yesterday afternoon. There's no downside follow through to any of these sell legs that we see coming in out there. Right? Now, different stocks are reacting, differently, but in terms of the market, there is no downside follow through. It's just getting bought up every one of these dips. And so you look and you say, well, that tends to be something that's really bullish, where we tend to see the market go not only higher, but much, much higher after periods like this, right? And so you have these kind of two competing elements going on right now, and the reality is, the overall market itself, it really isn't, stacking on anything serious here, and we're talking about, every day it's at a new high, but by a point or two, right? We're not talking about anything that's of serious substance or value there. So, very interesting mix of what is happening out there. It is one where, from an option trader standpoint, right, and I'm not speaking for the challenge, right, but just as a pure option trader standpoint, I look at it and I don't want to get too heavily involved, right? I've gotten involved in a few things this week, some Netflix, and, I mentioned The Spy this morning. But, for me overall, it's very light. And, one of the reasons is we're not seeing most stocks with big moves, right? We're seeing most stocks with very nominal moves, and every day 10% of the stocks have an exception to that, right? But then we look at even some of the other market dynamics, things like the TLT or bonds, right? We see bonds moving on up, and stocks not selling on off, right? And that has been a little bit different here. That has been an unusual circumstance, and so we see several of those going on, and all of it on fairly light volume. Not a ton of volume in there. And I do expect that we will get something for the market to dig its teeth into. The reality is that most of the currents of the market are still very bullish, right? So I can't jump on and go, well, you know what, we're going to fall because of this, this, and this. Yeah, we have a few warning signs, right? There's a few things that concern me that make me a little less confident than, a month ago. But, it is one where, from an option trader standpoint, there's a lot of time decay out there, a lot of time decay in a lot of trades. Now let's go to the challenge. Challenge, we're in all cash. No new signals on the board here. But there are a ton of crossovers on the board here today. And let's start with the downside crossovers. Now, when we have seen a massive list of downside crossovers here over the last 2 months, you know what the market's done afterwards? The market has gone significantly higher. Right, and it's one of those where I think the last time was back here mid-October, where we saw a lot of the downside crossovers on one day, and then we saw them, reverse and take on off. Right, but we're seeing things like Alibaba today. 3-day moving average moving down below the 7-day moving average, but coming off of a high, nothing. Just kind of a small pullback, not emerging into trend. And one of the reasons none of these downside crossovers are signaling is because most of them, the algorithm is basically saying, look, there's not a good chance that we see a 2 ATR move to the downside, right? And so it's not that these stocks can't pull back, it's the magnitude of trend is likely to be small. Bank of America, for example, right? Caterpillar. Same thing. Chipotle Mexican Grill. This one's really interesting. This one I thought had a chance to trigger, but again, it has that same thing. The likelihood of a 2 ATR move is pretty low. EOG has a crossover. Consolidation risk on this one's very high. FCX, coming off of a new short-term high here. We have U.S. Steel in the same group, kind of the same chart there. J.P. Morgan, just like Bank of America. We have AT&T, which is just like Bank of America and J.P. Morgan. And then Johnson & Johnson, which I thought, had a chance to trigger here today. You've talked about it this morning. I've been watching the options, and it hasn't triggered here. This one has that same element of, low chance of moving 2 ATRs here to the downside, though I may not be able to resist, and I may go grab some J&J puts myself into the close here today. But those are some of the downside crossovers that are out there. On the upside, we're seeing 4 crossovers coming into play. 3 right now. One of them's been pretty borderline all day, up and down, but gold. GOLD, Barrick Gold, but it's not a bullish signal. This is one where we continue to see these crossovers here on it, and it just continues to be in this kind of just small little channel rather than a big trend. We see Target with an upside crossover off of Walmart's earnings here today, and then Vulcan Materials, which we saw this morning, but nowhere close to a signal here with it. So, some of the things that I looked at, earlier today, like a Pepsi or a Procter & Gamble, with a chance to trigger. Neither of them have. This is one where, as I've mentioned before, I am working, in terms of the challenge algorithm. One of the things I've been working on for about the last 4 months here are early signals, meaning anticipatory signals. Can we go and anticipate a signal on Pepsi, right? Why would I be looking to anticipate? Well, if you anticipate the signal, you're going to get a better option price, right? And it's one where the loss, if it goes against, is going to be a little more mellow, right? And so, more reward, less risk. But the problem with anticipating is that the probabilities go down. You have more reward, you have less risk, but lower probability. And Pepsi was one of those that has been showing up on the, hey, this one could trigger list. Procter & Gamble here as well. But both of them, as they go, are good reasons why I still am not willing to go out and trade things that are getting close. I need to see the signal come in. The signal hits, boom, I'll go. But, close just doesn't cut it because the odds just simply are not good enough and are not long term sustainable there. So those are some of the crossovers. A little bit of commentary on why we're not seeing a signal come into play here on them. For as much as I'd love to go get into something here for the challenge, I just simply cannot here at this point. So I'll wait it out and look to attack on the next signal that comes into play. All right. Thanks for hopping on. Have yourselves a fantastic evening, and we'll talk to you tomorrow. Take care.